This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Hello, my name is Chris.
My name is Phil.
And I'm Old Man Logan.
And we're on an adventure.
We are on an adventure.
Chris, where does our adventure take place?
Well, I mean, if Bob's not really looking at the show notes, because otherwise he would say, why did we start with introductions?
I was getting there, and he went off on a tangent.
That's fair. That's fair.
I did. I went rogue.
You went rogue and blew the opening for me.
He
Nice
said
job.
he said the opening wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good.
I jumped in to try to save us.
Yeah.
Misdirected Mark Productions, only the best.
Oh my God.
We are starting at the beginning, though. Well, not really at the beginning. At the introductions.
At the introductions.
Because this episode is about introductions.
Introductions.
Man,
Yes.
we got to really work on our show intros. They're just getting better and better all the time.
Don't you remember interjections?
Interjections. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is the 371st episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast, right? 371. And we're going to talk about introductions. But let's get right into one thing. So, Phil, what's your one thing for this week?
One thing is this past weekend had my fourth session of Forbidden Lands with this guy, Bobo. For me, session 4 is the magical point on whether or not we're going to have a campaign or not.
Yes.
So, Phil, tell the folks at home, is there going to be a campaign?
There is, man. We all really dig this game.
We've been renewed.
Yeah, I am not. I would never have said from the get-go that this would be a game that I would totally love running, and yet, I totally love running this game. Like I like the play style it produces, and there's a thing about story scale. Like this game's story scale is really small. Like. There's not like if I contrasted it to like the Airy Peaks, right? The Airy Peaks was like life and death and monsters and treasure and all. Like this is literally like these guys delivered some beer, like to an outpost, came back to town
Amidst danger and daring do and terribleness.
I mean, they had some bumps and dangers, fought some harpies on the way home, and had a brush against a
legendary undead creature.
A legendary undead creature, which they did not fight.
Just ran away from.
No. I just kind of like looked at it, and it looked at me, and I realized that it was this legendary creature that the dwarves created. Essentially, they buried this warrior alive.
You mean a mummy?
No, they just took this
death
warrior woman.
kind of thing.
A big, tall warrior woman, and they just buried her alive in her armor, and she came back as an undead, and she haunts the dwarves. And I'm a dwarf, and I looked at her and went, oh God, we're all going to die. And then I just went, why is she just standing there looking at me?
Did you go, interjection?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I bowed down, and I apologized for what my ancestors had done, and then she just kind of walked away.
So you did interject on behalf of the party.
And then I went and I cleaned my underwear in the river.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, like the scale of this game is like really interesting, and like all the work they've been doing, like they're trying to make enough money to buy equipment to go and explore this stronghold that's nearby.
Like so that we can take it over and make it our base.
That's a good goal, and that was probably came from the group itself, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ooh, stronghold, let's take it over and make it ours.
There is like literally, like I have almost no planning going on in this game.
You are playing an OSR game.
Yep.
Oh, it's so OSR. But it's OSR, but I like these rules.
Which is cool, because it's like, this evolving, emergent story.
Yes.
Oh, it's very emergent. It's very emergent, it's very fun, and like I said, there's a scaling thing, which I think there's probably a show topic in there somewhere about scaling. Yeah, like what scale is your game set at? Like what are you scale? I think has to do with like the size of your opponents, the type of action.
Coming to an episode from Misdirected Mark near you.
Yeah, sooner than you might think.
Like next week.
Could be. Not promising.
Maybe the week after.
Yeah. But anyway, very interesting scale. So anyway, session 4, we had our end of session. Like at the end of session 4, we had our talk, and we decided that yes. We all would like to continue playing. So then I went and bought the other stuff for the game.
Oh, nice.
So I bought myself the dice and the cards And I was going to buy the campaign pack, but we actually still have plenty of material of our own left.
Yeah, we'll be a while before you need to dip into the campaign
Exactly.
pack.
So I was like, cool. Like, so I wanted to get those things, but I didn't want to buy them and then like not play the game.
Yeah.
I also made my own, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, I made my own clock for the game. So when you're traveling over land, you play out in 4 phases of the day.
Sure.
So originally I took like an index card and just wrote the words on the edges.
Then you graphically designed a thing.
And then I like went into Illustrator and I made this like really cool illustrated one. And then I bought spinners from Kaplow and I laminated it, punched a hole in it, and put the spinner in it so that you can just turn the dial to the part of the day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna sell it back to stuff. I'm gonna sell it back to Free League. I did send one to Stacy Delafrano from Contessa. She's also a big fan of the game, so I sent her the file. I was like, "Here, nice. I'm like, take this. I know you're enjoying this game as much as I am, and this is like clearly a thing this game should have had, but it didn't." So anyway, that's me with Forbidden Lands and Bob.
Yeah, so I'm starting to get excited for football season. It's very, very close now. I'm excited to watch the sport in general. I'm excited to watch my team, the Buffalo Bills, and I'm excited for our fantasy football league at Misdirected Mark because it should be fun.
So we'll talk about it in the not the after show, but the conversation corner about things going on with that a little bit.
Yep.
Let me just quick correction. I think in my excitement, when I was talking about Stacy, I had said she, but actually the correct pronouns is they.
Ah,
yes.
So sorry about that. I got a little overexcited, but the chat room caught me. So when I sent it to them, they were very excited.
Good job, chat room.
So sorry about that. I got excited, and I think when I get excited, that's the hardest time for me to kind of get pronouns straight. So anyway,
it's gonna be fun. Football's gonna be fun, Bob.
Yeah.
Chris,
what about you?
Are my Giants?
What's your one thing?
Are my Giants still terrible?
Yeah, they're still terrible. But they have Saquon Barkley.
They have Saquon Barkley, and their rookie quarterback is looking really good in the preseason.
What the heck is it? Ronald Jones?
Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's some people thinking that he might unseat Eli
sometime during the season.
Sometime during the season.
I don't want to get into a big thing about it, but I kind of think that needs to happen. Like it's time to put some new blood in.
People were saying Eli's done right before he won the Super Bowl.
Would you put a pin to talk about the Giants in the after show so that we can tell Phil about his New York Football Giants?
Absolutely.
Because there are some things that are about them that aren't bad.
Okay.
There's a lot of bad, but there's some things that aren't bad.
It's been another rough season.
Right. And nobody, I think, on this gaming podcast wants to hear any more about
that's
football,
fair.
At least till later.
I only want a summary.
Yeah, we'll give you the quick, the 3-sentence summary.
How about you?
So I got to run my Eberron game that I haven't run in about 3 months on Friday nights, and it was session 11. That's right, we played 11 sessions of this game.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's a longer campaign.
For you, that's a very long campaign. It's a commitment.
Well, I tend to run longer things when I get a chance to. Like if I most of my stuff is supposed to be intended to be long, 15 to 20 session kind of sprawling adventures. It was fun. There was a party. And it was a party that had to have espionage stuff going on with it because it's Eberron and it's in Sharn. And the adventure, I'm not going to say what adventure it was, but man, D&D has an issue with writing like party scenarios and espionage moments and things like that because, and I think this is probably tricky with all kinds of games like this, like who's at the party, what information do they have, what's the actual important information, what are the mechanics that get utilized inside of that.
Fair.
Like these are things that I don't think D&D has figured out how to do very well, and I don't know how many games have figured out how to do that very well. I mean, I've played some Call of Cthulhu scenarios that have a hard time with it. Like even the murder mystery party thing. Like you have to do a lot of upfront work to really figure out kind of how to run everything that's going on at the party. This is only supposed to be it was intended to be a 2 to 4 hour game, like the adventure is. Like this, it got way more out of hand with the game that I was running because I am using all the stuff that has come before and all the NPCs that are important and mixing it all together. I'm not going to talk about the spoiler stuff about it because there's somebody in the chat room I'm pretty sure that actually plays in that game. So
yep.
I'm not going to do that.
Pretty much looking right there.
Yeah. No, it was good though. It was there was a star-crossed lover story in there that was it was sort of a relationship that had fallen apart because a changeling had been in a relationship with a member of the Church of the Silver Flame, a high-ranking member of the Church of the Silver Flame. And
scandalous stuff.
They don't like each other,
correct,
in general. And this changeling had lied to the person about what they were for 3 years. So when that truth came out, things got nasty, and that has been sort of unfolding over the course of sessions, and it came sort of to a head this past session. Actually, not sort of, it just came to a head this past session. But through the diligence of the player characters wanting to see a relationship work out, they kind of worked together fairly well, and things ended up for the better for the two NPCs that were in love.
I love a good romance.
Utilizing mechanics, like there were some rules that had to be made after narrative role playing was had to be utilized to make the roles better. So like conversations with the characters to even get to the roles, conversations that gave those roles advantage, and then even I let the heroes use some of their hero points because we're playing with hero points.
Sure.
It was fun.
I like hero points.
All right. Neat. Oh, so that's my one thing. We don't have any announcements. Except for the scholarship drive is over.
Scholarship drive is over. I have the list of people who supported our campaign, and there's actually a 3-way tie for the person who donated the most money. And Rob was like, "How do we tie break it?" I'm like, "We don't.
We don't tie break it."
So for the top 3 people, you'll be getting an email from me. I'm pretty sure it's on my to-do list to do tomorrow evening. So you'll get an email from me, and you'll get to pick something from the Encoded Engine catalog, and I will send you a PDF link for it.
Would you put a pin in for the after show to talk a little bit more about Eberron? Because some people were mentioning they need to read more about the Eberron today. We can talk a little bit more about Eberron in general.
Absolutely.
Cool. So we're gonna go to the workshop now? Are you ready? Are you ready? Your voice okay? You need to take a sip of your coffee?
No, I'll take it afterwards.
Take it afterwards? All right, here we go.
Okay, ready? All right.
Let's do it!
Workshop! This is the workshop introduction that tells you all about what the workshop does, because we're doing introductions all about role-playing games to introduce them, to make sure they're good. Workshop!
Don't suck.
Nice. Well done.
Thanks. It was tough because I had to both introduce the workshop and then explain what the topic was at the same time. It's very meta.
It's very meta.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the introduction to the workshop.
It was the introduction to the workshop, which is the introduction to the... Right, yeah.
The introduction to the workshop about introductions. It's not. It's a little meta.
Yeah.
It's not super meta.
No, but I mean, it's a little recursive.
So last week we talked about onboarding, and this is a topic that I've been thinking about a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of introductions. In fact, I'm in the middle of writing a Gnome Stew article that's turning into more than one Gnome Stew article about just a lot of things, but introductions is one part of it. It's been something like 2,000 words long so far, which is too long for the stew.
Oh, that's too long.
So I have to break it up.
Yeah, you do.
But this is the idea of how to make good story introductions. That's what we're going to talk about specifically tonight. And in some ways, the story introduction is similar to onboarding and what it sets out to accomplish. But, it's not something that gets talked about a lot or often well executed in published products. Like, first scenes are hard.
Yeah.
They have to do a lot. That's why. And we'll talk about that.
Yep.
But
I will also say that not only do they have to do a lot, but I don't think a lot of. I'm just going to say this. I don't think people put a lot of effort, like designers and stuff. Like, I think they focus on the middle and not so much in the beginning.
Yeah, I feel like that's a mistake too. So without a strong foundation and introduction, like you're not really giving yourself a lot to stand on.
You're making it hard for whoever's got to push that thing uphill.
That's true. I'm going to turn you up a little bit. So a little low.
Sorry.
That's not your fault. It's my fault.
Alrighty.
All right. We're going to talk about introductions. We already started talking about introductions, but before we really get into that discussion, we need to do the definition thing. So you ready for your bumper?
Oh, I love it. Anytime.
Behold! You are in the presence of definition panda.
Right?
I wobbled at that time.
Epic.
Cool. Let's talk about story introductions. So story introduction, I'm using the word story very specifically, right? Because that is a unit of measure that we use.
Correct.
And in fact, we will probably start with that definition, right?
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, right. So
refresher on story.
Right. So we're accustomed to the idea of an adventure, especially us older folk. Like module would be another way to put it. Right. Adventures are a subset of stories. But we're talking about something that has a beginning, middle, and end, and is focused on a small amount of elements and themes. Right. I think we all know what we mean by story, but I think the easiest way is adventure. Which is different from session, right? Like we separate story from session, right? Because session is just the time we get together to play a game. Story is the beginning, middle, and end. It may take us multiple sessions to get through a story, or we may get a story done in one session, right?
That's true.
Cool. All right. So to talk about introductions, we're talking about initiating a story.
Correct.
Right? So in most RPGs, this is done by the GM/facilitator.
Yeah, they're like often they are the one that sets that first scene, right? In Turning Point though, like that's in D&D, like the GM almost always. In a lot of traditional
games, it's
even
very
even a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's on the facilitator, the GM role to initiate.
Right, even like Swords Without Master, the overplayer always
they're bringing the thunder.
There you go.
Or the lightning, or the thunder and the lightning.
Lightning if it's going to be a perilous.
I just wanted to say thunder and lightning.
I'm with you.
I mean, it's just, but in Turning Point, it's the first player's job to help run that Turning Point scene that starts.
Yeah,
playing.
that's not a but. That's an addition, right? So the first player is the facilitator of the game.
That's actually that's true.
And so the facilitator actually also sets up the first scene of play. Yeah. Now there are exceptions. Don't jump all over the chat room or yell at your car while you're driving. Like, of course, there are games where players set the first scenes and whatever. But by and large, if we're looking at the pie chart, right, like the big slice of the pie, this is like what the GM does. Now, in literary terms, this would be considered the exposition, right, and often the inciting incident. Right, if we were to put those two together.
Well, the exposition is whatever might come beforehand, and then the inciting incident is when we like go right in with the camera and focus down.
Exactly. So our story introduction can encompass both, like all the way up to that inciting incident, right? So the exposition is the part of the player work of fiction, in which the background and main conflict is introduced, and the inciting incident, right, is that it's that moment that hooks the reader into the story.
Yes.
Right?
It's why they say a lot of times, like, first sentences in books and novels are really important, because a first sentence should really kind of hook you.
Yes.
And then first paragraph, and then first chapter. Like, all of that stuff hopefully will hook you.
Right, because you need to kind of pull people along.
Yeah, and if you ever read a novel that has a prologue and then a chapter one, like, they serve different purposes. Yeah. That's what we're talking about here.
Yep. Right. Cool. So the inciting incident, right, is the kind of the moment we thrust everyone into the story. Now, in cinematic terms, this would be like the opening shot.
Yes.
Right. So our opening shot of a film is the audience's initial entry into the world, and it's an important step into conveying the story's main ideas, themes, character arcs, and perspectives. Right. And we know from like the variety of media that we watch that there are a lot of different types of opening shots.
Now, can I take these definitions back a second and talk about them for a moment in role-playing game terms?
Yeah.
So, exposition. Exposition is often what I like to call session zero.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you are making characters, but part of that is like exposition in a lot of ways.
Where did we come from?
So exposition, Phil calls it exposition. There's a couple of things that you can do with this idea. And I'm probably stepping on some of our episode here, but I want to.
Probably not.
The session zero stuff, the background material. Exposition is also background material. Stuff that you don't, like, you can also build this stuff out beforehand that you don't see on screen. Like.
Right. So I would actually say that probably the more refined term is that at session zero, you are doing kind of the campaign exposition.
Correct. I call it game prep instead of session prep.
Right. Because a lot of times what we're doing with our session zero is really setting up the shape of the campaign, right? Like it's at the end of the war and these factions are in the city, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But the story intro, right?
Yeah, that's different. You can actually have a little prologue, be like, here's the setting of the scene, which I did that for our Eberron game that I'm playing with the Wednesday Evening Podcast All-Stars right now. Like, there is like a little paragraph of exposition that I give before we actually have the first scene.
Yes.
You know, it's like that voiceover sometimes that you see with the camera sweeping over the city.
Absolutely. I often I love doing those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I think in order to have quality exposition and quality inciting incident, you need to have your session zero. It's very important. Mm-hmm. And you can use a lot of that material you don't even have to have the exposition, right?
I mean, if you don't have campaign exposition, it does.
I mean, as part of the beginning of play, like you can have.
Oh, we're going to talk about that, right? We're going to talk about how much. Like, I think you have to have some because you have to describe something.
You do. I mean, if you don't have any campaign exposition before you sit down, you're making everything up at the table.
Yeah,
and then that's considered your exposition too.
Yeah, I mean, I did a very minimal campaign exposition for Forbidden Lands, where I was basically like. This morning you left the town of Hengard, which is 2 hexes behind you, and you're right here.
Mm-hmm.
And let's begin the game.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because you can do a lot of different things with exposition.
Yes.
Like,
Well, exposition can be very long.
yeah, and you don't even have to, have it as part of like the play of the game. Like the first game is session 1. It can
Right.
be your entire session 0.
I mean, if we really take it out to an extreme, you could have a microscope game
Correct.
be the campaign exposition for your upcoming campaign, and that's like a whole session that's just setting your background and stuff.
And I call all that stuff. You call it campaign prep. I call it game prep
It's fine.
versus session prep. I mean, they're all the same thing.
Sure. Well, someday we'll standardize all those terms.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into story introduction then. Now that we've kind of have those definitions hashed out,
Yeah.
are we good on all that stuff?
I feel good. Like, I mean, the introduction is the thing that gets us into our story.
Yeah. So a story introduction. The introduction initiates the game.
Yeah, a lot of times, right?
Yeah. Sometimes if there's pre-story mechanics,
Yeah,
those work. And sometimes they don't.
Right, like some games have like a setup thing where like before you actually start the adventure, like somebody has to make this kind of check and somebody has to make that kind of check.
Or fate.
Yeah, like Bob had a
Fate has all that world creation.
No, I'm talking about like just any session. So like for instance,
I see
so
what you're
for
saying.
instance in Masks, Bob's character, the Legacy, had a move that after time had passed, if after a significant portion of time had passed, rolled to see how your family looks upon your behavior. Like
Urban Shadows has a lot of this stuff.
right, so you can't when you start the session, even if I want to start a new story, I have to stop first, do that move with Bob, resolve it, and then I can be like, cool, now you guys are at school.
Yeah.
Right, so some games have a thing that kind of jams themselves before the introduction, but in many cases, the story introduction is the thing that kind of kicks off your session. Okay, that's what that meant.
There's some Vincent Baker had some of that stuff for Apocalypse World too. When you had a player that wasn't around for a while.
Yeah, the love letter kind of thing.
Yep, that was that's another one of those things that happens.
Yeah, because it inserts itself before the.
Yeah, that's actually a mechanical effect.
Exactly.
From a game. So those things happen or they don't. So what does it set, Phil? It sets the setting where the characters are, and the immediate situation.
Yep.
Like those are pretty much the really important things.
Yeah, exactly.
And so in creating the inciting incident, what does it do?
Yeah, so it provides the character the situation that the story's ultimately going to address, right? And that doesn't actually have to be part of the immediate situation. Like, for instance, our immediate situation could be like you're in the middle of a tavern brawl, right? Because I might, to tap into one of our other episodes, I might ask the leading question, like, Chris, what did you do to start the brawl in the middle of the Red Claw Inn?
Yeah, because now we've just you've leading questioned an inciting incident.
Yeah, no, that's not my inciting incident. That's my immediate situation.
Oh, immediate situation.
So now you guys are all brawling, right? And I'm like, cool. Like, so as this brawl's going along, you hear a thunderous clap out in the city square.
Oh, so you've gone to we're fighting for no reason. Well, for whatever reason I come up with, to the actual inciting incident of the scenario.
Right. So the immediate situation doesn't always have to be the inciting incident. A lot of times we pair them together, but we can definitely do that thing. We see this all the time in TV shows. In fact, James Bond is notorious for this, right? So the opening of every James Bond movie has an immediate situation that's only tangentially related to the inciting incident, right? Because we get a moment of James Bond being all cool, and then we cut into like the intro song.
I do want to talk about at some point. I think it's later in the notes how that actually matters a lot to theme and tone and
Absolutely.
and the elements of play that are going to come up over and over again if you want to have something that feels more consistent.
Yep, absolutely.
So the introduction, it can start pretty close to that inciting incident or further away. You just actually gave that example.
Yep.
Starting too far away, it can really make an introduction feel wandering or pointless. Like if you don't get to the point of what's going on for 20 minutes in a movie.
I almost thought you were going to say it.
If you don't get to the fucking monkey.
Get to the fucking monkey.
I didn't want to just.
We'll get into that term a little later into the show.
That can have a purpose. Like if you're trying really hard to do something a little, I don't think it works very effectively for role playing games. It works very effectively for other kinds of storytelling.
Again, that axiom that role playing games are not the same as other media.
Correct.
Yes. So you were just talking about starting too far away, right?
Yeah, it can feel just like it's wandering and pointless, and people can get frustrated with that because a lot of people just want the plot.
Yep.
And they want the point.
Exactly. And so a close introduction helps get the game started, but then moves the players into the situation, allowing the players, ultimately allowing you more time, like especially if you're in a one-shot. Like if you're doing a really close introduction, then we're not wasting a lot of time. We've left a lot of time for the rest of the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can start with narrative, or you can start with action.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure there's other things you can start with, but those are the two that we have.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start with action, like going right to it, that's an in media res.
Sure.
We've talked about
you
it
and I
before.
both have employed this tool before.
I love this tool.
Yes,
it's one of my favorite tools.
It is actually a fun tool.
Yeah, but I'm also very action oriented. Like I like action sequences and shots and things like that. And it's useful because action's exciting, right? Like, and players love rolling dice and engaging the rules because that's the game.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you can't engage the rules in different ways.
Not at all.
With like investigation, like playing Gumshoe, like that's a different kind of thing. But like any kind of crime show usually has the. I mean, Ange is here, so she's going to tell me I'm wrong probably, and you're here too, and you've watched a billion crime procedurals. But like, you start with some indication of the crime, and then you go to the in the TV show. There's usually some indication of the crime, what's going on, and then you go to the investigators that hear about the crime and are on the scene.
Right. So, for instance, if you want an idea of like a kind of a little bit of a long narrative opening, if you look at the structure of Law and Order, right? So Law and Order opens with characters we've never seen before, doing something that like living their daily lives, and then they come upon the body, right? And then the intro starts, right? Dun dun, right?
Yeah.
Then when we come right,
do.
and then when we come out of the intro, right? Then we immediately cut into, it's essentially in media res, we immediately cut to the detectives on the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
Right? Like Briscoe is standing there like talking to the beat cop going, okay, give me the rundown, right? So that's actually, if we were doing that as a role-playing game, that whole first part is the GM narrating a couple of NPCs who stumble on a body.
Yep.
And then we get to the part where the players
By
start.
the way, that's every episode of Bones ever.
Right.
And there's a lot of them.
Oh, and that's actually a pretty common trope in police procedurals,
Yeah.
right? The discovery of the body.
It's almost a common trope in Monster of the Week stories too.
Right.
Because like, oh, look, there's a scene of the monster killing somebody. And then the monster hunters are like, find out about it.
Right. So if we take that same example, we can do the narrative opening where we can be like, two joggers are running through the park, chit-chatting with each other. When all of a sudden one of them trips, looks down, sees a body. Right?
Yeah.
And then a hard cut, and then like, okay, so you're in the park. Or we can actually start our game with, okay, you're in the park at the crime scene.
Yep, that's the difference between a little exposition and just
media res.
in media res.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we have that, I'll thrown out there, let's talk about where are we at? We're talking about introductions can start with an unrelated topic and segue into an inciting incident. What is this? What's
so
that? That's the James Bond idea.
Yeah, that's the James Bond idea, right? Action movies are notorious for this. Action movies use it as a trope to essentially show off the badness, like how badass a character is, whether it be it the bad guy or the good guy. Like we often get this kind of beginning action thing.
That also shows like tone, style.
Yep, absolutely.
What we can expect going forward.
Absolutely.
It sets a precedent.
Like Hobbs and Shaw does this for.
I haven't seen it.
Hobbs and Shaw does this like in 3 different scenes.
Yeah.
Like it's like a little too much. Like they have to show off how like badass. They show like how badass Idris Elba is. Then you have to see how badass the Rock is. Then Jason Statham, and then we can like start the story. It's almost a little much.
It's a solid comment in the chat room. Ange, I recommend being careful with an unrelated opening. Your players might be more interested in that than whatever comes next.
Yes.
Which happened to be once.
Yeah.
I was running a con game, a 2-part con game at the QCC a couple of years ago. It was Monster of the Week, and it was supposed to be something, and it was and we had like an unrelated start in Chicago, and that ended up being the game that I ran.
Yeah, you like basically scrapped like your whole
game
session notes.
Because it was more interesting, and everybody was more interested in that, and had more buy-in. But with the help of the players at the table, we had a really good time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, Eric the Weregator was in that game.
The Weregator is like a gentle force of chaos.
That's fair. He's definitely a rainmaker.
Yeah, he's in so many good ways.
Next thing, let's talk about the number of different techniques for an introduction.
Right. So if we're talking about, we like to make axes here, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about if we're talking about far and close narrative and
So
immediate res.
how far away are we from the beginning of the
Exactly.
How far away are we from the inciting incident to how close are we to the
Exactly.
inciting
And
incident?
if we compare, and if we put that up again on another axis against in media res versus narrative, like we now wind up with 4 choices.
Between like how much are we going to thrust the narrative on the characters, or are we going to let the characters find the narrative?
Exactly.
I think that's probably the best way to describe that, right?
Yeah. So how much lead time before you're going to make them do it?
Yeah.
And then how direct are you going to be in delivering?
It's sort of like a bullseye. Like the inciting incident is the bullseye.
Yes.
And it's really how far away from that.
We starting over here.
Yeah.
We starting right in the middle. Okay. So we got like 4 of these, right? Arbitrarily, we have like 4 of these.
Sure, and they're open narrative, close narrative, in media res related, and in media res non-related.
Yeah. So give me the introduction for open narrative.
So this, do you want the question or do you want the actual technique and stuff?
No, just do the. I mean, I
want me
gave
to
you
ask
some
the blue
example
thing?
lines,
Okay,
but like
yeah,
this would be the
sure.
example. If you were GMing, this would be the lines.
So you're in this town. There's some people here. There's like a butcher shop and like a smithy and things like that. And there's like a board with some adventures on it and like some people that know some rumors. What are you gonna do?
Right.
Go to the tavern, get drunk.
I'm gonna go.
Okay.
I'm gonna go look for some equipment.
Okay.
Go shopping.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Right. So this is the slow start.
Correct.
Right. We're far from the inciting incident.
this.
Yep.
This is my
we're gonna
least
we're gonna
favorite
talk
thing
about that.
to do.
We're gonna talk about that after the break. Least favorite and least favorite. What it can do in a positive way, if it's done well, is it can create a space for the characters to interact with the world and each other before the inciting incident. So, like,
Let me put it this way. I actually hate this start unless you have a hard frame.
sure,
I mean, if your frame is really hard, this is a fine start.
sure. But if this is done softly, this can actually be the one that like wanders and meanders, and no one knows what's going on.
If your session 0 and your game setup didn't like give any kind of direction,
Yeah,
like this is bad.
yeah.
Because you've got no direction.
Right. This technique really only works when time is on your side
I mean,
and people are patient. Right. Like
and people are active.
Yeah, because if people are just kind of dead and like waiting for you to do something, this is painful.
Yeah.
But if you've got people who are like, like there are groups that like instantly want to interact with every NPC in town.
Yeah.
So like this kind of opening gives them a few minutes to go stretch their limbs.
Yeah.
Like
Or your rainmaker will step up and be like, all right, time
Yeah.
to do it.
your Rainmaker cracks his neck, walks in, like, I got it. Here's what's gonna happen.
Yeah. I guess we could. Can we talk about this one for a little bit?
Yeah,
Like,
we can.
why it's bad, why it's good, things like that.
I mean, how it can be bad, how it can be good.
Yeah. Like,
Sure.
Those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bad part is if you don't have anything around it, if you've not set anything up around it, and it's really just like, well, I'm going to drop you in this town, or I'm going to drop you in this mountain with your equipment, and I've told you very little about the world or anything. Like you just have you brought some D&D characters to the table, and you're in this dungeon and go.
Yeah.
Like, well, why are we here? What are we
What
doing?
are we doing? Right? Because we don't understand, right? We don't understand the situation.
Yeah.
And we don't actually understand a lot of the setting. So the only tool that you have as a player is to start asking questions.
Yep.
Lots of questions.
Which, if that is the setup for the game, that can actually work pretty well. 'Cause
can.
then you can create around it.
Yeah.
But if you prefer something other than that, like this works really well when you do have a hard frame around it. Like, you are going to the Airy Peaks because you need to find, the Sapphire Star.
Well, now we're getting
Right.
close. Now we're starting to drift into close narrative, right? Because we're starting to move ourselves closer to we're moving ourselves closer to the inciting incident.
Sure, but except I'm not going to give you an inciting incident at all. I'm just going to say, like, you were at the edge of town. What do you do?
Yeah, that. Okay, right
Like,
there.
I've
Yes.
given you a purpose.
Yeah, you. All right. Yeah,
But now you have no direction other than the purpose.
perfect. Right. So in which case, what you've done is you've imparted the situation.
Correct.
Right. You are here to seek your fortunes.
But there's zero inciting incident.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Because I'm not gonna event them into the game.
Right.
Now they actually have to figure out how to get to the Airy Peaks, find a map, maybe figure out what to talk to a bunch of people.
Yep.
Like, where's the Sapphire Star? Like, that's part now. Like, that's their goal, but they have no idea how to get there.
Right. So I think where open narrative works well is one, when you have time, and 2, when you have actively engaged players.
Yes.
Right? Because if you have a table of actively engaged players, a rainmaker, whatever, this is like almost all you need. And like they'll go to work.
Yeah. I think that is the bare minimum that you can get away with for this to work really effectively.
This is not one I recommend for one-shots, and it's not one I recommend for tables where you don't really know everybody. Like,
yes.
This is not one I will use when I'm like, I am playing a game and I don't understand who you people are. Like, I don't know if you're all waiting for me to do something. I don't know if where your creative cycles are. Like, I don't know how creative you are. There's too many unknowns.
Yeah.
But with the right group, I would be comfortable doing this as a way of like, hey, slip on your characters, walk around a little, get kind of, get into your character,
Meet
and
some
then
NPCs.
meet some NPCs, and then in a few minutes, I'm going to drop an inciting incident and get this thing going.
Or at that point, maybe you don't even have to incite the incident because the inciting incident is them eventually going into the mountain.
Right, I might just tuck an inciting incident in my back pocket, like,
I suppose the inciting incident could be like, oh, you got the map.
or I could have a
will tell you
party
what-
come down the mountain all busted up, dying with a map in their hand.
Yeah, right? Like, there you go.
Yeah.
Those are inciting incidents. They're just not, they're not what I would call hard
Nope.
incidents.
Mm-mm.
Cool. Well, let's talk about close narrative. So you are entering the Red Scales Inn to meet with your contact about information on the White Fang cult.
Right. So this technique is getting us a bit faster to our inciting incident, right?
Yes.
We've just physically put the players closer, right? We've moved from the edge of town right to the door of the inn, and are just about to push them inside, right?
Yeah, and we didn't give them a vague goal. We gave them a thing that they're going to do.
Right.
Like-
We've put them really close, as close as we can get before this is an in media res.
Yes.
And what this does do, though, is it does create a little space for the players to address how they want to handle what's about to happen, right? Because they could say like, "Oh, cool, you know what? Bob and I are going in to go talk to the contact, but Jerry is going to swing around back in case we need to make an escape. Jerry's going to make sure the alleyway and the back door of the inn are clear."
Oh, and then Senda's going to come in 5 minutes after and go scout the upstairs.
Exactly, right? Because it gives the players a little bit of autonomy to say like, okay, look, you are going in, you are meeting this contact, but do it on your terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's it. And this is a good technique when you want to get to the story quicker. Like I'm not opposed to using this in a one shot.
That one will work.
Yeah, it totally will work.
Now, this is we've kind of like moved down the scale of how hard you want to set that
Yeah,
that first scene.
So
I think we're about to take this one more step up, right?
let's just take it up one more notch.
Let's go, and then the next one is in media res.
Related.
Well, yeah, there's related and there's non-related, but
Yeah.
really they're both kind of the same situation. They're just you're putting people in the same space. Just it's the how important the events are around it are different
To the rest of the story.
to the rest of the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in media res related, so you are in a car from the 1940s driving down the ruins of Atlantis with merfolk and flying machines chasing you as you're carrying the trident of King Poseidon.
Yeah.
Roll for initiative.
So I don't know a lot of the whys, but I know what our immediate situation is, which is run like hell.
Yes.
Right?
With the treasure.
With we have a treasure.
Uh-huh.
We'll find out later how we came to get it.
Uh-huh.
Did we find it? Did we steal it? Whatever.
I mean, hopefully during your session 0, you've figured all this stuff out.
I don't know. Sometimes I do this by flashback.
Sometimes
with
you do
questions.
this stuff by flashback.
Yeah.
That's also That's also a completely legit way to do it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like those things sometimes. Sometimes I like to be like, cool, sometimes I'll start like this, and then I'll go a round or two, and then I'll flash right back and be like, cool, now, Bob, how did we find out about this temple?
My cousin told me about it.
Right? And I might just go around the table and ask a couple questions just to get enough background. They'd be like, cool, now, who's going to, the merfolk, like, shoot at you again?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Listen, this technique is great because it starts with action. It perks every player up.
Yeah, it does a few other things too, which the when we get into like first scenes and what their purpose, like I'm assuming that this is supposed to be a pulp action adventure game.
Sure as hell is from the description.
Right? Like that is the game that we talked about to play, and that's how I'm starting that game because that's what we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if we're going to talk about playing a Law and Order style investigative game, I'm going to do the thing that you mentioned earlier, like 2 joggers are running down the path in the park. One of them.
That's not our immediate res, right? Like our immediate res is you're standing over a body.
Yes.
There's a blood splatter on the wall, and there appears to be 2 bullet holes in the back of their head. What do you do?
Yeah, that is the in media res version of that game, which means like, well, it's crimes, it's murder, it's your cops that are solving these things.
Yeah, and your choice of words, like, so especially within media res, your choice of words as you open up this description is going to tell a lot about what's happening and what the setting and situation are.
Because the first one is pulp action adventure. The second one is investigative police procedural.
Yeah, like I might in that pulp action adventure one, if I was adding on to some description of that scene, I might be talking about how like ray bolts or what like bolts of energy are like hitting all around you and kicking up. Like I want to make it like full of action, right? Yeah. Your car, jumps up and down as it like hits this small hill, kind of like just to put a little of that descriptive motion, like, oh, clearly we got some action, high action going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's in media res related, because the ideas, all the elements are related to the story that's going on.
Yep, these are fantastic. I think these are fantastic techniques when we get into one shots like con games.
I also think these are fantastic campaign starters.
I have done several of these.
Yeah.
My Masks game started with a actually in media res non-related opening.
Yeah, I'm actually a bigger fan for the campaign starters of in media res related.
Yeah, that's good.
Because you want to put, I think when you're starting your campaigns, you want to put the themes and ideas, or at least some of them. You don't have to put all of them in there, but the big ones, like for action adventure, pulp, like that's how I would start that campaign.
Yep. I will give the example of the in media res non-related for the Masks one, and why I think it was good genre supporting.
Yeah, hit me.
Well, here, do the example so that we have the full set of examples here.
Sure. So you spent a few weeks trying to find out more about the White Fang cult. Your contact at the Red Scales Inn has some info for you, but right now the owlbear on the path is between you and the inn. Roll for initiative.
Yeah. So this is the one where we're going to start the game right with some action. But we're not starting with the inciting incident. We've actually placed an action scene in front of the inciting incident, right? Because we've stuck an owlbear between the players and the town where their contact is. Like we know what the situation is. They want to get to the town and get information from their contact on the White Fangs, but their immediate problem, which is not related to what's going on, is this owlbear.
Yeah, I want to make it very clear. I saw a comment in the chat room. This introduction idea is about first scenes.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've done all the work that you needed to make sure that everybody knows who the heck they are beforehand.
Very fair. Very fair.
So anything we say is with that in mind. Like you've done the work to make sure the characters know who they are and they know each other.
Yeah, you're starting the story.
Yes. This is starting the story after you've done all the pre-work.
Yep.
We're going to assume that's been done well for the purpose of this conversation.
I think that's a very fair assumption that we did not describe. So yes, that is very fair. Because ultimately you would do that first.
Yeah, because that would be.
Although I could even argue there's cases where you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, like, sure.
What's a great example of that on TV? The opening of Lost.
Yeah.
The opening of Lost opens with Jack waking up on the island. He staggers out onto the beach, and there's like a busted plane, and all the major characters, when you sweep through the picture, are all there, but we don't know who anyone is yet. Not exactly a thing I would do for a campaign. But maybe,
depending on the kind of game that I'm.
That's kind of advanced. Like that's advanced introduction.
Well, that's
shit.
that
with a good table. That's
That's advanced. And that's a thing where I would.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's a thing where I would make sure that the players all knew their character.
Yeah.
Before they started, like make up your character, make sure you got it all down. You don't necessarily don't tell anyone because we're gonna do that through play, and just like. Come to the table and sit down.
And then there's the exception to that where the characters don't remember anything.
Oh, yes.
And you just drop them in there.
There's a bunch of role-playing games that do that.
Yeah, the Jason Bourne
You
effect.
need a good table to pull that one up.
Not just that stuff. Like, you need buy-in. Like, you got to make sure you set that stuff up.
Do not bait and switch this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, these are cool things to do in the games that you're running, but you have to make sure that you set it up with everyone so everybody knows what's going on.
So let me say for the in media res non-related. First, let me just run through a few things about it, and then let me tell you one of the danger points for this opening.
Sure.
All right. So again, this technique leads with action, right? We like that. It puts players into something to do, but not into the inciting incident of the story. It creates a level of excitement, right? Because now we're rolling initiative, we're excited.
Yeah.
And my advice is don't make this first encounter too tough, right? This encounter is really about showing off how badass the players are.
This thing should also relate to the kind of game that you want to purport.
Yeah.
Like, if fighting monsters is part of the game, then this is a wonderful first scene, right?
Right, but also don't like wipe out half the party with this.
Well, no.
Like,
unless it's an OSR game.
I mean, in an OSR game, you've taken off all your safeties.
Yeah, I mean, or not even, I wouldn't want to say OSR, unless it's a gritty, deadly game.
Sure. If you're playing...
And it only took you 5 seconds to make your character.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you have 4 of them.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dungeon Crawl Classics, for that lovely idea.
Okay, so here's the dangerous part of an in media res non-related, is that this can be the setup for a bait and switch. Like, do you remember Brett's...
Call of Cthulhu game or Delta Green game that turned into a Wraith game?
Right. So you would have opened with a Delta Green mission. In fact, that's what I think Brett did. He opened with a mission and then killed everybody in the beginning of the mission and then like restarted the game in Wraith. We've talked about this.
Yes.
Like this, so this is where the in media res non-related can be kind of dangerous, is that it can be the setup for a bait and switch.
By the way, you can get buy-in for stuff like this. You just have to be like, look.
Well, don't do it as a sneak. Like, tell everyone.
You don't even have to do it as not even as a sneak. You can be like, look, are you up for anything? Like, I could do anything. Are you okay with that? Like,
yeah.
Sorry, there's a BDSM joke about that.
Yeah.
Which is like, what are you into? Oh, I'm into anything. Awesome. Go scrub my floors. Go wash my car. Right? Like,
hey man, like, you know,
I mean,
you said you were into anything.
You said you were in. Yeah.
Let me put it this way: are you into anything related to the game? Like, are you okay if I just like kill everybody in the first session and make everybody ghosts, and then you play as ghosts for a while, and then I bring you all back to life? Like, come up with some other ridiculous example. Like, are we okay with it being that out there?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
you can get that buy-in, but like you have to get that buy-in.
Right. I mean, we've said it before, right? Bait and switch is like one of the riskiest maneuvers you can pull in an RPG.
Yeah.
With the right group, you can pull it off, but mostly bad.
Yeah. On the topic of labs, we're getting new ones, so hopefully that'll fix our problem. There is one that's bad. I'm pretty sure it's Bob's.
Am I having problems?
Every time Phil moves, there's a lick up.
I know, but it's not Phil's lab. It's yours. I know, right? Weird.
Okay, that's mind-boggling, but anyhow.
I know it's not for you talking. It's just the way that it's functioning. I don't know
because I can sit here perfectly still and do nothing.
I thought I had it happen
sometimes
like right there.
Moves.
Yeah, but that's not you. I'm pretty sure it's Bob's lab. But anyways, moving on.
The point is, there's another danger in something like that, and that is you give them this in media res scene that's not related to what the campaign's going to be about, and everybody enjoys that. Yes. And they want more of that thing, like, oh, well, you know.
Well, yeah, you have this inciting incident, but tell us more about these people. Now, I mean, that's what that was Chris's opening for your Monster of the Week.
Yeah, for that
where your intro wound up being more interesting than not more interesting. It became immediately interesting, and the players wanted that.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun. It was fun.
Okay, all right, so cool. That's a couple different types of intros. You want to talk about like why this even matters?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the strong introductions help in a number of ways. So what's the first one?
Right, it's going to help in creating a drive for getting the story progressing.
Yeah, it's going to help set what the objective or direction of the story actually is.
It's going to be engaging.
And it's going to show off the setting and reinforce the situation. And more importantly, if you're doing it well, it's going to hit the themes and the elements and all the stuff that's going to come later in the game too.
Exactly.
It's because that is like your foundation. Like,
I'm going to just say, if you're writing adventures, you should just write those 4 things down we said.
Yeah.
Put them on a post-it note and put it in the first paragraph of your game.
Don't forget about the theming and stuff for yourself.
Yeah. Well, it says right there, it shows off setting and reinforce the situation, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, well, that's not theme.
No, but you should definitely ask yourself, right? Like, you should ask yourself these questions when you're writing an intro to an adventure, right? Like, is it going to create a drive?
Yeah.
Right? Is it setting the objective and direction of the story? Is it engaging?
The engaging part's the harder part because that's objective. Or that's
Right.
subjective, not objective.
Right, but engaging, but if you know your players, you can
Sure,
guess,
yeah,
you can guess some
I was
elements.
talking about for adventure writing purposes.
Right.
That's
For
harder.
adventure writing purposes, have I put enough potential things in here to be engaging?
Correct.
And am I showing off the setting? Am I reinforcing the situation that we're in?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Which brings us right to how do you make a good introduction? So based on what we've already talked about, when you consider making an introduction, here are features that we think you should consider.
So make it personal. Like work to tie personal elements into the introduction to create more of an emotional hook for the players.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I tell you a thing, a way I did that in an introduction?
Sure.
So in Busted Main,
Yeah.
and this serves two purposes. So in Busted Main, I think a lot of people know this adventure. Many people in our chat room have played it. It's a Hydra Hackers adventure where this co-op has a co-op that you helped build, vegetable co-op that you helped build has a busted pipe, and you have to come in and repair it. Right? It doesn't sound like an adventure, but trust me, it's totally a fucking adventure.
Mm-hmm. It's totally an adventure.
Right. But so what I have is I have the players getting a call in the middle of the night from the guy who runs the co-op in a panic that there's a busted pipe, and then I immediately hard cut to that everybody walking in.
Okay.
And as soon as they open up the door to the basement, they hear water gushing on the ground, and then I stop and I'm like, cool, flashback 1 year. Flashback 1 year, you were building this out. Chris, as the plumber, what technical challenge did you encounter when building this, and how did you get around it?
So the technical challenge I encountered was I didn't. It was bigger than I expected it to be. So I had to get oversized pipes that I didn't quite have. So I had to like kind of cobble it together from pieces that I had laying around.
Perfect. Right. So one, we've just actually made it personal, right? Because I've tied you right into the inciting incident, which is the busted pipe.
Yep.
And the other thing I've done is I've actually mined potential issues that I can have come up in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It like serves dual purposes.
True facts.
Okay. Cool. The next tip is make it clear what needs to be done after the inciting incident. Right. A good inciting incident makes it clear what you should do next.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the players should do after the inciting incident, it's not inciting enough.
That's correct.
Yes.
So know where you're going. That's the idea.
And make sure that it's clear to the players. Like, yeah.
So then the next thing is you want to match the type of introduction with the genre and length of your session. So that's also important.
Yes.
I mean, if you're playing at your own place or in your home game or whatever, or even out at a store, and you have between 4 and 6 hours, you have a lot of wiggle room.
As we say on Pandas, time is on my side.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So Con games, they do well with close and in media res related openings due to their single session short time frames.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic. And longer sessions and campaigns, you can use those open ended and media res non related openings to get there.
Yeah, because you've got that extra time to play with. Oh, you know what I meant? I said before we head out to the mid session break. I was going to mention the example for my Masks game about in media res non-related.
You were.
So I opened because I like to think of Masks like a comic book.
Uh-huh.
So I opened our first issue of our comic book with with the players on a rooftop, with the players on the rooftop stopping. There you go. Oh, that's going to be dangerous. You can't tether me.
Apparently, I can't.
A little tape. I'll tape it to me. Anyway, I started with the characters on the rooftop as this villain was coming up out of the Bryce Laboratories, who wasn't actually really related to the story going on. I just wanted to give them a few moments to do some moves and stop a villain. And then I cut to, cool, the next day you're on your way to school. Right? Very genre reinforcing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I like there is definitely ways to do in media res non-related that are very genre conforming.
Uh-huh.
All right, cool.
Yes.
So that's the introduction.
That's our introduction
That could be a whole episode.
to introductions.
That could be a whole
It
episode.
was a lot of words.
It was a lot of words. So let's what's the chat room got? Anything?
So Blake Ryan asked the question, what about those games where you play the bad guys raiding town or whatever, and then you switch to the new hero PCs that are dealing with the effects of that raid? 2 different introductions.
I totally cut Phil off from telling me to go to the thing. That's not.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have to do 2 introductions,
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
So what you probably like, you're going to want to do I would do a media res for the bad guys. Cool, you're the bad guys. You're sacking this town. How much more do we need to know, right?
Yeah.
And then and then the aftermath one, I probably open it a little more because I would probably let the players wander around and kind of see the aftermath.
So in reality, what you have is are they playing? I'm sorry, are they playing both?
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, if they're playing both, and they're 2 different games, really, or 2 different stories. So if you're doing that alternating chapter thing, like it's a fascinating storytelling technique because I've seen it before,
Sure.
like in novels and whatnot. Like you were actually bouncing back and forth between point of view.
Yes.
So if you're doing that, then you're basically having one follow the other.
Yes. I mean, the other way to do it is if you're not going to actually play out the villains, you could just ask the players questions about what happened in the town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like what sign of the sacking of this town has disturbed you the most?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a fantastic leading question that opens up a whole bunch of information about what the villains did and potentially things about the villains. Like that's definitely a way. That's definitely like leading questions are your friends. We should mention that leading questions in introduction are a great pair of tools.
They do work well together,
right? Because leading questions will allow you to farm the table for answers about your introduction. Like they can help you set setting and tone and all of that.
Cool.
Do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
All right, so there's this show on Misdirected Mark Productions. It's about gnomes, or at least about gnomes talking about gaming stuff, and they're trying to not get thrown in stew, or their clones aren't getting thrown in stew, or some combination thereof, both.
I hear that's a problem you all have.
Oh, it's the gnome cast. You have that problem too, I hear. Aren't you a gnome?
I am, but I'm like a founding gnome. I'm never in the stew.
That's not what I heard.
No, that's a contract.
I don't know if it's even a contract, because the contract that I saw was every gnome is a clone of themselves.
Yeah, where did you think you all got cloned from? The original 10.
Oh, that's so weird. Anyways,
Of which there's only like 3.
A bunch of gnomes get together to talk about gaming topics and themselves in an effort to entertain you and avoid being thrown in said stew.
It's fun. I was on it recently.
Were you? I was on it a little while ago.
I did the Get to Know a Gnome.
Apparently, Phil sacrificed a lot of gnomes to be immune.
Sorry, Patrick.
Douchebag.
Don.
Why do you think the original gnomes went away?
They didn't go away.
They'll systematically wipe them
So
all
where does
out.
Ange fit into that category then? Because she's like between the new batch and the old batch.
Yeah. I mean,
She's the transition.
but
gnome.
Ange has a special
Transition gnome.
place. Like, Ange is the keeper of the gnome cast, so
That's true.
that affords a certain level of protection at all times.
Oh, so I suppose we should get back to things, huh?
You know, like, did we have any other questions?
Oh wait, yeah, we did.
Oh,
Avi wanted to know when do we want to use the different introductions?
Yeah. I like again, and I think we talked about this, right? How much time do you have? What is your genre? What is your genre use? Like for an action game, I'm not doing a slow open.
Can I Sean P. Kelly? It depends.
Right, but not in a Sean P. Kelly way. Let's just say that there is a convergence of the amount of time that you have, the types of players you have, and the type of game / genre that you're playing, that will pick optimal openings. But even then, I will say, vary it up. Don't always, like, if you like in media res openings, don't do every game in media res.
That's fair.
Because it's a beat thing, right? Like, if every story opens in media res, it's not as special as, you know, if every game you have opens in a media res, then opening a game with a quiet narrative becomes a very different.
It also has a bigger impact.
Yeah, it has right, because that change in beat is what also makes us pay attention to things.
TV shows use that to great effect. Episode starts different. Like, oh, I should pay attention.
Yeah, like for instance, it give you 2 different types of Star Trek openings, right? So, you know, Next Generation opening, you know, space, we're looking around, right?
Space,
like
Captain,
Stardate. Like we're coming up on the next planet, blah blah blah, right? That's an opening. Or if as the screen comes to light, you hear the red alert klaxon, very different opening, right? Very different opening to the game. So you do want to match all of those up, and so the tips are when you have time You can do the ones that are a little further away from the inciting incident. If you have a group that is going to make action happen at the table, or just make things happen, you can also do one of those more opening ones. And then if your genre has those kind of elements, like if I'm playing action movie world, it's in media res, right? Because it's action movie world. My opening scene is like it may be unrelated, but it's going to be in media res no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. But I do like ones. Like, have you ever done one with like a panning shot?
Yeah, actually, I just did one with like a panning shot.
Yeah. I like those openings too.
I
where
don't
I'm like,
often do them, but every once in a while, like it's worth doing it.
It's a nice, if you can do a nice description. It's a cool setting. Like, it's a cool setting description, like the sun rising over the buildings, and we see people out on the street, blah 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 blah, blah, and then bam.
Except
or as Bude just said,
that I did.
You get a wide shot of a spaceship, and then the Klingons decloak.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Mine was it was a panning sort of shot of Sharn and the lower parts of it, because it's only 6 months after the last war, and there's just the streets are teeming with refugees, and people are dirty, and there's Sharn is like cast in darkness, and then as I move up the towers, everything gets a little bit lighter. Then you come upon a party scene. There's like a carnival going on the top of a platform.
There you go, because now you're contrasting the suffering and everything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then of course we find out what the spies, our Dark Lanterns of Sharn, are actually up to at this party.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good. That's a really good It's a really good opening.
I had thought about it for a while before I actually put it together. I'm actually like prepping for games again. It's weird.
What? Hey, as the game demands, right?
Yep.
Well, as the time is had and the game master wants to get better at his craft. In my case.
Well, there's a place for prep.
So let's talk about some questions that we can discuss.
Yeah, a little round robin this thing.
Yeah. So what's the first one?
Your favorite type of introduction, and it can be by genre. So it could be, your favorite type of introduction for a particular genre, as a player or as a GM.
Mine's
what do you like?
Mine's always a media res.
Yeah.
I love starting with action. It's just a thing I do.
Throw me in and have some stuff happen.
Hey, you're being attacked by a giant in the high halls. Go.
Yeah.
I like in media res a whole bunch, and my second favorite in that case would be close related, right? So like maybe I'm not going to do right into in media res, but I'm going to put you right in the middle. Like I'm going to put you right on the edge of that situation.
Yeah, you're ready to step off.
I'm almost never going to do the slow opening. The only time I would do the slow opening, I can't remember if I did it for. I think I did it for Tales from the Loop, where I was like, let's talk about how you wake up in the morning and go to school. Right, and so I did like each player get up and you came downstairs and had breakfast with your parents.
Well, you're establishing some normalcy before the weirdness occurs.
Yeah, so there's one where the long opening.
It's why That's why I said it depends.
It does depend, right?
Because
so it's not a cop out. It literally depends.
Certain stories require different kinds of storytelling to be effective.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying that you should take a moment to consider what kind of opening, what kind of introduction you want to do for your game.
Yeah.
Like I know, I'm getting ready to prep the Continental game for this weekend, right? We're going to do the first John Wick Continental game. And the opening is, I got a lot of thoughts about how I want to open this game. And, I'm kicking back and forth through a couple different ones. I'm fairly sure that I don't think it'll come as a surprise that I think we're going to do an in media res opening.
So for heist games, there's usually a legwork phase.
Yes.
I mean, you will get your inciting incident or whatever, which is basically what's the job.
Yes.
But that's somebody telling you information. Now, how you get that information, how you get that job, could be close or far. It could be even in media res.
Ocean 11 actually has a pretty it's a pretty distant opening.
Yeah, because they spend a lot of time introducing the 11 characters in a lot of ways as they're introducing the job.
We start with Danny getting released from prison and then finding Rusty, and then it isn't until partway through that Danny's like, I have an idea. Right? And then they begin I think the part of the legwork is Danny and Rusty collecting the other 9.
Yep.
Right, which is amazing, right? Like it's one of my all-time favorite films.
Yeah, it's constructed very specifically.
Very specifically.
And that's a difference between role-playing games and storytelling like that. Like we can take some lessons from that.
Right.
But mostly the structure, the the long opening is like we establish the characters, like the player characters, then we establish that there's an idea that one of them has, which that is a if we're going to talk about them as player characters, like that is a player having an idea to drive forward based on their backstory.
Right. Then they do what any good player would be is they go see an NPC, which is Ruben.
Yep.
Right. Ruben's
to get bankrolled.
Well, first Ruben's like, oh, you think it hasn't been done before? Yeah. Right. It's been done before.
Yeah. He gives them the rundown.
He gives them
top three.
So what that does in the introduction is it sets two sets of stakes. First, Ruben explains robbing a casino is really hard.
Yep.
Right? And then the other thing he says is he asks whose casinos are, like what casinos are they? And he's like, those are Terry Benedict's casinos, and you better know what you're doing. And then he immediately sets up how dangerous Terry Benedict is. Right? It's a really smart one. I love that scene because it's just funny, but it's a really smart scene in that it sets the stakes of both the difficulty of what they are setting out to do and the difficulty of the opponent that they are going up against.
Yes.
So,
there's a good comment in the chat room. Like you could have the end of a heist be the beginning of the next heist too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is the unrelated in media res opening.
Yeah. Or it could be related, you just don't know it.
Right. Yeah. In Operators, so like because Operators is the game I'm using for the Continental game, that's actually how they suggest you start your games, is start with the ending of an unrelated mission. Let the players be like really cool and badass, and then transition into the mission that you're going to use for the game.
By the way, if you want to learn everything you ever wanted to know about heists for a role-playing game, just go watch All Leverage. You'll pretty much get everything.
Yeah.
I don't think they miss much.
Yeah.
And also, you'll get like some of the. I'm sure somebody out there did it. Somebody has a dictionary of all of the scams.
Yeah, yeah, because there's not an infinite amount of them.
But they're great. Like all the terms they use for them.
Yeah,
even Ocean's 11 teases that, right? Yeah. Ocean's 11 does the same. Need the biggest Etta Fitzgerald ever, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh God, my love for heist.
Yeah.
My love for heist genre is
so good. It's one of my favorites.
It reminds me of that Dane Cook skit.
Yeah, that bit. There's always that new guy. Whenever you're doing a job, there's always that new guy that nobody's quite sure about.
Dane Cook's like, there's one thing that guys want to do more than sex. That's be in a heist. Like every guy wants to be that guy who's like, I'm hacking into the mainframe, but they've routed me to Friendster, right? Like, it's really. I'll play it for you.
Everyone wants to be Hardison.
Yeah.
Everyone
wants to be on a heist.
Yeah.
Right. Talk about establishing how badass of a character you are in an opening.
Yeah, right.
It's so good.
All 5 of them,
yes. Really. Well, they do. Like that's very much a thing, right? Like they establish how badass each character is right in the opening sweep of the game, or game of the show. That show's basically a game.
Yeah.
Whew, boy, that was question 1.
Yeah, I suppose.
And the Italian Job is an in media res.
The last.
Now that one is related because
that last job sets up the next thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's betrayal.
Yes.
And then so the Italian Job is weird. It's like a revenge story. So it's more like a Western heist.
I will reference Leverage. Heists do not have to be wealth related. Go watch Leverage.
Yep.
There are a lot of things that the Leverage crew steals, like information.
Well, here's the first thing well, you're right. It doesn't have the information. It's whatever. But their whole purpose isn't to steal necessarily money from people. It's to ruin them.
Yes.
Because they're robbing from bad people.
Right. So it's often evidence, information, or setting them up to like get caught on tape or something. Yeah, it's all those things.
Yeah. Also, anything espionage wise, A-Team wise, in a lot of ways. Mission Impossible was referenced. Those are all very similar to Heist. They have the same kind of trappings as the Heist.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your least favorite introduction? It can be by genre, as a player or a GM.
The slow opening, man.
The slow opening is my least favorite to use. It's also probably the hardest one to pull off well.
It is. And I think that the slow opening is the hardest part about the slow opening is that it's so player dependent. Because if the players are sitting there waiting for the inciting incident, nothing fucking happens.
I mean, it can, I think it's a lot dependent on the frame of the game.
Yeah, what game are we playing? What's the table like? It's probably my least favorite too. But if you have the right people, then it's not bad. If you have the situation is all conducive to it.
I don't want to say it's my least favorite. I want to say it's the one I use the least, or I'm a part of the least.
I think that's fair.
I think it's definitely the hardest one to pull off well.
I do think it's one. I think it's hard to pull off. Two, I think you have to really think about if that's what you think your opening is going to be. You should justify it to yourself first, right? Like you should really think to yourself, like, why am I doing this one? Like I'm pretty sure I can say this with 70% confidence. I'm pretty sure I will do the slow opening for Things from the Flood because we're about to meet the characters 10 years later.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to want to rush into
we're gonna build into that slowly. That'll work great.
It's interesting to play it out in scene, especially if you do a bunch of the background information beforehand and have that conversation. Yeah. Because a lot of times, when you do that, you don't need to worry about that slow open if you're using it, depending on what you're using it for.
Right. But in this case, specifically, because we played these characters in Tales from the Loop, when we do Things from the Flood, now I want to start showing contrast to what we knew about the character before, like whose parents are still together, like whose parents aren't. Whose parents still have jobs at the Loop, and like those are all going to be really interesting things that a nice slow spanning opening is going to let me build into.
You know what games probably do pretty well with certain kinds of slow opens is anything that has like a web map for drama. Because drama is all about those conversations, and you kind of need to give people space to talk.
You need to create space.
Yeah.
And but then once again, the frame is set. Like people have their own agendas in those kinds of games, and they're probably moving and maneuvering to achieve their own agendas.
Yes, which again makes that slow opening very player dependent, right? Because it's the players who have to close that gap.
Yes, but I guess my point is that you've already set it up. Yep. And made the players aware that it is on them.
Yep, I agree.
Is that so? We're all going to agree. Like we all think the slow is the toughest one.
I definitely think it's the toughest one.
I don't know if it's my least. It's definitely my least favorite.
I actually like your rewording of the question. What's the easier and what's the more difficult? Like
I think it's one of the harder ones. To pull
I don't
off.
think
it's definitely the hardest one for me to pull off.
It's hard to pull off, and like I said, it's not my favorite to pull off. But I know, it's a conscious decision. If I'm doing it in a game, I'm doing it because I had a reason for doing it.
Yeah.
How do you adapt an introduction in a published game to work for your players?
Right. So you've written some published stuff. Like, how do you make it? Like, you've written published stuff, and you just use published stuff, right?
Yeah.
What do you do with the introduction that they give you versus what you actually run at the table?
So my favorite D&D adventure I've written for Adventures League. It has 3 characters that you actually ask people about.
Leading questions.
Yeah, the leading questions. So they are already in the game. I don't know if that's really good for the introduction though. Like because the inciting incident for that particular adventure is you're sitting in an inn and things attack through the windows and the whole town's under attack.
Right.
So like you're in a town that's under attack. Deal with it. Like.
Which is kind of a cool place to put like a little bit of that breathing room and then drop the incident onto them.
Yeah, there's not even very much breathing room. It's just like you're sitting at the bar having lunch, and then the window gets caved in by a ward or something.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, when I look at introductions from published games, the first thing I'm trying to think of is, can I use what they have here? Like what they have here, is it related to the backgrounds of my characters, or do I need to come up with something that ties the background of my characters to the things that are coming up in the intro? Like, do I need to make one of those characters in the intro one of the characters' relatives?
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
And we're talking about writing a published thing, or we're talking about adapting?
Well, here it's how do you adapt an introduction, a published game, to work for your players. Right, so this is you're the GM.
I'm the GM. I'm absolutely just taking stuff and throwing it out and using the characters that are related to the characters to tie it to them. So
you're just discarding and just writing one fresh.
For instance, not even necessarily discarding. For instance, like the idea is that they have to be in the adventure I just ran. They have to be informed that a party is going down and something is wonky about the party. So instead of just using the contact that they had in the game, I just substitute in the contacts that they have in the game world that they're close to.
Yeah, if they name a person, a character, an NPC.
I'm subbing that one.
Sub that in for somebody that's
But they're still
relevant to
serving the same function.
Exactly.
Yep.
If there's a place, substitute that place for a place that the character
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like just interchange the pieces.
When I have 10 sessions to draw beforehand, it's real easy to do.
Yeah.
I almost think that I want to, if I get into writing adventures at some point, like for Hydro hackers, even if they're just like simple write-ups kind of things, is just to put down in bullets, here are the things you need for your introduction. You need a contact who's going to deliver this information. Like, if you need one, if you need one, look at the sidebar. But if not, just take the contact you have in your campaign and just like fill in the blank. Like,
It is not I'm with you. I think that's a great way to do it. That is not the accepted convention.
no, but I'm not
That's the
into
thing.
I'm not into accepted conventions.
That's fine.
Nothing about me is conventionally acceptable.
Because the sidebar is actually put in your own contact.
Well, that's fine. I would do it the other way around, right? I would do let's build your introduction, and on the side, if by chance you don't have these pieces, here's some pieces you could pull it. But that's fine. Like I said, I'm not conventional.
No.
I think you kind of answered the next question too.
I think we can just blend that together and just talk a little bit more,
Yeah,
like
what
for
can we do?
designing adventures.
So the how do you make them more useful, right? Like, how do you make them more useful for people running them? I think what you said is the best way to do it, honestly. Like, look, here's the stuff we gave you, but if you're inserting this into the middle of a campaign,
here's the things you need.
like, yeah, this is the roles they play. Whatever works best for you.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're the
Insert
one that's
them.
writing it, don't write the introduction as hard-coded. They go to see X NPC in X town at this place.
You can do that.
The more effective way, I think, would be to vague it up a little bit and leave the room for them to easily swap the stuff in and out, rather than just here's your standard thing. Oh, and here's a sidebar. You can replace this and that, or whatever. If you leave it kind of vague and say, hey, there's a place, I'm not saying it very well, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm going to tell you from my experience with everybody who plays D&D, and especially like all the stuff that I've been running for, nobody wants that.
That's the weird part.
Let me not be too blunt here, right? But I'm not writing for D&D.
And that's fine, but we're talking like the most of my adventure design experience, and where a lot of adventures get written and published, is for that
agree.
particular
But here's
game.
the question.
Why
is it like that? Is it just because that's the way it's always been?
People are comfortable that way. There's not as many ridiculously creative people as you think there are. People that just want to like have that thing. And
I think that is fair.
Yeah,
right?
That's absolutely fair.
I think.
Excuse me.
If you were going to write it hard coded, like, you want to be in media res.
Yeah.
Right away, like, you are standing in this room talking to this person.
Yeah.
That's fine, because you're already there. Like, you don't have to expect them to get there.
Yeah.
Like, that's a mistake that a lot of adventure writers make. Like, you're gonna go here and talk to this person, but we're gonna take 1,000 words to get you to that point.
Yeah.
When really it's like the opening box text should be, you're standing in this room with this person talking to them.
You have just entered the ballroom. The count is across the room, and you need to get information from him. Here we go.
Yeah, that's even the soft one, right?
That is
like
the soft one.
The hard one could be like, you were sitting in a room with the count,
Right.
who has summoned you here to tell you because he has work for you.
Yeah, I agree. Like that takes you right to the inciting incident.
Sure. If I had my way, it would be to use bold worded roles that people are playing and be like, insert your own thing.
Mad Lib.
Yeah,
Mad Lib.
Yeah, Mad Lib.
Your contact blank
Yeah.
has told you about the job, whatever, that has the treasure from your enemy blank. Yeah.
But even the other end of the spectrum, even like the Dungeon World players and things like that, they don't even want that. They just want those one sheet things.
Yeah.
So like, adventure writing is a
Pain in the ass.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is a pain. It's a pain in the ass. Like, I'm always so we haven't published any of them, but because WereGator runs so much Hydro Hacker stuff, I give WereGator my I give WereGator all my notes for my adventures. But my notes for my adventures,
those are frameworks like that are a page and a half long.
Yeah.
Like, I know what they look
There's
like.
a page on top of it that tells you how to set up the game.
Yeah.
Like, because I have a page for onboarding. So I have a page that's like how to introduce the setting, go make characters, explain the handful of important differences in the rules. Like, you got to explain the hydration meter and things like that, and then like flip the page. Now run the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I've stopped writing D&D adventures, because I hate it. Like, it's frustrating.
Yes.
Like, I don't mind reading them and like developing them and things like that, because I know how it all works. But the writing of them is problematic in a lot of ways.
You know, I mean, I'm going to try not to make this analogy sound condescending, but it's the McDonald's analogy, right? Like, when you go to a McDonald's anywhere in the world, you are expected to have a certain type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
When you are writing for D&D, especially if you're writing for Adventurers League or something, there is an expectation that your stuff looks a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want you to fancy that up, right? Like, they just they need it to be exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, we got way off topic here.
Yeah, it's okay. That's good. I like this.
So back to like adventure introductions. Like, I think you just need the things that you talk about. There's the thing that you talked about before, those 4 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And plus making sure that all of that has, what me and Sean Merwin talk about is the unity of effect. Like, make sure your stuff's tight as far as like theming elements and like the ideology behind your adventure, whatever that is throughout the adventure, your introductions should reflect that even more so.
Yeah.
What were those 4 pieces again?
Make it personal.
Yep.
Make it clear what needs to be done after the inciting incident.
The objective direction that the story is going to go into, and make it engaging. Whatever elements that you think will be engaging.
Yeah, make that like your checklist, man.
Like, what are the coolest things that you can think of that will make this thing people buy into this thing?
Exactly. And how clear is not only the inciting incident, but what, like, if your situation is you are adventurers, have you made sure that it's clear that you're adventurers? Right? Like, have you reinforced that you're adventurers versus spies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest problems with adventure introductions is they don't give you a lot of... No, because we're talking about the introductory scene, not about like the background information or like setting the game master up, right? We're just talking about introductions. So I won't get into that rant. We won't talk about that rant. I have a few rants about that.
That's fair.
Yeah, man. If you do that in your introduction and you keep it to the point where it's readable and understandable, then you're good to go.
Yeah. And again, you know, yes, we're telling you, like, put some thought and a little work into your introduction, but, you know, it does have, like, it's going to help your game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's going to move your game forward.
Man, that foundation is so important.
Yeah. I mean, especially if your players are wandering in the first scene or two, like, you missed the mark on your introduction.
Then
and then you're doing a lot of work.
As a designer, then you're making your game master, the person that's running your adventure, do a lot more work.
Yeah, you're like, you get them to the dungeon, right?
Like, why don't you give them a hard pointer to the dungeon?
Right. Or just put them right in front of the dungeon.
Yeah, that too. That's a pretty hard pointer to the dungeon. Heck, put them inside the dungeon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't even give them the choice to walk away from the dungeon.
I think I think old adventures did not do this. The old D&D modules did not do this for GMs, and that's why the trope of like, hey, we're going to play this dungeon, and then everybody wants to stay in town. It's
why I always ask, why do you want the thing that I'm asking you to go find in the Airy Peaks?
Yeah. Right, like, quick, make it personal, right? That's one of our things, right? Why are you going into the Airy Peaks?
All right.
If you're not going to do that, just drop them in it.
Yeah, we are now beating the dead horse. Let's move on.
Beat.
Stop beating it.
It's good.
No animals were harmed on this episode.
Right. I think we have introduced all we can about introductions and must now move on to something else.
That is, now we're going to introduce the social media depository.
Or
the conversation.
Yeah, it says that on my screen. Sorry, I have to change that.
I'm gonna just quickly answer one of the statements in here. I had the Popeyes chicken sandwich. I work near Popeyes, and as we know, when I get mad,
was it good?
It was good.
That's so good.
It was good. I'm gonna say this. This may raise some. I actually liked it better than the Chick-fil-A, and that's not just for the lack of homophobia on it.
Yeah.
Which does make the chicken actually taste better, but it's crunchier. Like, it's a crunchier sandwich because it's just Popeye. It's Popeye's normal coating. But let me tell you, the first time I went to Popeyes, they were out. Like, I walked in, I was like, chicken sandwich? They're like, nope. I was like, shit.
The first time you went after everybody started talking about it being better than...
Yes. Yeah. And then I went a second time, And then I looked over on the side of the kitchen, and they must have made like 100 of them all morning. Because as soon as I ordered, they like put my sandwiches in a bag and handed it to me.
You were already
Nice.
ready.
Like I was in the middle of handing my credit cards. They were handing me my sandwich of bags of sandwiches.
Bags of sandwiches. Bag
Actually-
of sandwiches.
Two
A bit more sandwich?
That's sandwiches.
Yes, that's actually all I got. I got like 2 sandwiches and a pop. It was good. Anyway, that's not my only.
I apologize for my adventure rant. Me and Sean have been talking about adventures a lot.
I don't know why you're apologizing. It's fine.
Sometimes, you know, that's the way it
Because
works.
I'm not here to hate on that stuff.
No, but that shit's hard, and you are writing to a very specific style and spec, and it's not the most creative style or spec. It's a hard spec to write to.
When I contrast it though, like the Dungeon World folks don't want that stuff.
Well, because the Dungeon World, so here's the two sides of it, right? On the D&D side, they want it to be a very specific way because that's how they expect their GMs to run it. On the Dungeon World side, the expectation is the GM's going to just do all that. Like,
Yeah.
give me the bullet points of what this thing's about. Give me the cool bits, and it's on the GM to come up with the introduction.
It's one of the reasons why I think that as Jason Cordova and Fear of a Black Dragon has shown us that a lot of those OSR modules are really great for
Because they have like cool intros.
so for like Dungeon Worldy style, like World of Dungeons, whatever kind of gameplay.
Yeah.
Like it all works really well for that. Like I could run the Caves of Chaos using Dungeon World, no problem. It would work
Without a
fantastically.
doubt, it would be fine.
Keeping the Borderlands would work great for it.
X1,
Which
Isle
one's
of
that?
Dread?
Isle of Dread.
Dread.
Yep, that one. Pick one. The Slavers.
Oh,
like all
the
that
Slaver
stuff.
series totally would work. They all work. It's the expectation, right? The expectation for Dungeon World is like, don't prep this, use a minimal amount of stuff, and make up all the shit at the table.
Uh-huh.
But to be honest, you don't have to run Dungeon World like that. You
No.
can actually write an adventure.
Well, I agree with you. I have.
Yeah, you have.
And so have you.
I have.
Yeah.
It works.
It
works.
does.
And it doesn't break. The game does not set fire and explode in the middle of play.
Actually, you wrote something that was like
I wrote an
for-
adventure.
you wrote something that was for teaching people kind of like how Dungeon World functions.
Because I needed to teach myself.
Yeah, like
Yes.
it doesn't even need to be that in depth. Like you did some work.
I did. I mean, I wrote an adventure.
Yeah, but like you wrote all the stuff of the adventure, not just like not like a DCC or OSR style adventure. Like there was a.
You could. I actually did a conversion, although I never finished it. I had a DCC version.
We're talking about Dangerous Space Jail.
Correct. I have a DCC conversion for Dangerous Space. Jail.
Yeah.
It's just that one of the scenes is way too deadly.
Oh, okay.
But it was a funnel, so it was like, hey, the space prison has appeared. Hey, townsfolk.
It's not a funnel.
Oh, it was a funnel, man.
It shouldn't be a funnel.
You
Oh,
ran
it was
like
a funnel. I ran it like a funnel. Like,
Everybody died.
oh, so many deaths. The problem was the scene where I didn't need people to die. You know that scene with a missing stairwell where the gravity's reversed and you have to jump from rock to rock?
Mm-hmm.
Totally does not work with 0 level characters.
No.
I murdered so many. Like, we killed like 8 or 9 characters in that scene. I was like, you know what? You guys make it past this. I was like, this scene's broken.
So since we're conversating in the conversation corner,
Yes.
I just say conversating to annoy Bob at this point. Look at he gave me the Bob face. He's like, oh, I'm angry at you. Not really.
Conversate is not a word.
So in running D&D these days,
Yeah.
I find myself running it like exactly the same way I wrote Scum and Villainy. Like the skill checks are approaches.
Sure.
Yeah, so like you narrated a thing. Which skill do you think that is? Then we just like we
think it's
discuss
fit.
it. Yeah.
I
That's
actually like that technique a lot. Like, I do it. I try to do it as much as possible. Like, tell me what you're doing. We'll figure out which skill that applies to.
yeah. We're coming off the whole. I'm coming off the whole like moves idea from Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. I still like me some Powered by the Apocalypse now and again, but like I'm much more happy with how the Blades in the Dark or Forged in the Dark system works as far as setting the.
Sure, because it's fiddly. You like it. It's fiddly in a way you like it.
It's
right?
not even just fiddly. It's more free form.
It's both more freeform, but there's an element of interpretation, right? So there's a place where the GM gets to make a judgment.
Sure.
Because if I tell you that I'm going to wreck my way out of here, and you're like, yeah, that's not actually as effective as you think it's going to be.
Uh-huh.
Like I can set the I can set that to low, right? Like the effect on this is going to be low.
Yeah, because
because it's not the best approach you should have used.
My favorite one is still like when I can make it like your effect's going to be great, but it's desperate.
Oh yeah,
I love when that happens.
like you can do that,
And
but
as players, we love when that happens because desperate actions give XP.
And they can go terribly wrong.
and don't they give gambits?
Actually, regular ones can give gambits if you
Okay.
roll crits or roll
Gotcha.
sixes.
But yeah, like
What risky can give.
So that's
gambits.
that's the part. That's the part of Blades I like as well. Is that you can use a variety of approaches for a problem, but what the GM gets to do is gets to basically make a judgment of that one is not the best one. Therefore, it's either going to be more risky or it's going to have diminished effect.
I've also found that like because the way that we play it, like it's all about the narration. So like somebody narrates how they're doing something, and I'm like, well, what approach was that? Because I'm not really sure. And then then we start talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like when we played for that short period of time, we played Veil 2020. Veil 2020, the approaches are emotions. So you're shooting somebody, but it's how are you feeling
Interesting.
at the time
it
of
was
the shooting? Are you calm and cool?
It was a
Are you
very
angry?
different way of looking
That's
at a
different.
Right, and so your attributes were based on emotions, and then Fraser had this like cool I think he got it out of a textbook. It's this cool emotion wheel, and on the outside of it has like a whole bunch of different words of emotions, and they funnel into the 4 or 5
more
core
specific.
stats.
Oh, nice.
So
That's
you would be like, oh, I'm really angry, and you'd be like, cool, angry traces to this emotion.
Yeah.
Now roll your.
It took me a couple of times to wrap my head around it before I finally got it.
And to keep from spamming it, there are 4 emotions now that I'm remembering this, and they're opposites of each other.
Yep.
And when you use one, you put a check mark next to it, and you remove a check mark from the opposite one. So if you get too many check marks, you can't use that emotion again. So
It's
you
like
have
2,
to
I think.
you have to start learning, you have to start varying, which means that you have to start varying your you got to start thinking about what your character's feeling and working that into your narration.
That makes perfect sense.
It's a really interesting. So I'm with you. Like I think approaches are really neat because approaches get away from mechanical things like how good are you at picking a lock, and rather they talk about like how good are you at doing these things, but in this with this way, this mindset, this technique kind of thing, right? Which I think is cool because it opens up to more things. Like you could be really intimidating, or really nice, and it's sometimes can be very. It can still be forceful. Like it gives you some latitude for more narrative description.
Yes.
Instead of just being like, I got a 7 in lore.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, what I have is I have an approach called scholarly. Like, I'm just very thoughtful and I think these things through, or I'm super logical, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, nice sidebar.
Yeah.
I mean, I love talking about it.
Feeling super nerdy tonight.
I am a flip from what I used to be. Like, I did not enjoy Blades in the Dark at all. But I really love Scum and
I think you didn't like Blades in the Dark because I don't think you like the setting. Blades in the Dark is about playing very bad people.
I also didn't like how we were playing the game because I didn't think the group that was playing the game was playing the game towards the rules. Then again, we did burn down a art museum in the first game. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea, which I mentioned more than once.
I opened that fire started very small. Like I opened it as a very soft move. Like, hey, that a little fire has started.
Yeah.
Like, as in, hey, you might want to put that out and it'll leave a mark of evidence that like you were here because that was the complication, but not like
where it burned down half the art gallery.
That was a player choice,
not mine.
Not a GM choice.
Not my choice.
Nope. And granted.
And then I couldn't beat on or kill the person that did it. So.
Yeah. As a player character, I mean, PvP. There's rules for it.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I was talked out of it. Just saying. They deserved it. Okay, I'm done.
It's fair.
Anyways, it's not really that contentious. It's not that big a deal. It was like years ago.
It was years ago.
I don't know. I really like running the game. Like I really like running that game. I'm really looking forward to Band of Blades.
I am gonna at some point run it again because my last couple times running it, while I've enjoyed, like, while I think it's been effective, I don't know if it's my favorite way to run a game.
It's definitely more fun than I was expecting.
Yeah, I find it to be a lot of cognitive load. I find that game to be very cognitive heavy.
Let's talk about something else.
Sure.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Like I did some. If you looked on Twitter, I made a kick-ass Chinese barbecue pork
You
roast.
did. I would love to taste that.
It sounds delicious.
That looked awesome.
You know what? That's my third time cooking it. I'm feeling very confident now. Like I'm feeling very confident that I can pull this that recipe off. So now, like, I'm willing to. I made it for my dad, who came up this weekend because he was getting my son and bringing my son down to Connecticut for the weekend. So I was like, cool. I'm like, hey, I don't often get to do this for my parents. I'm like, Dad, can I make a pork noodle stir fry? So I made the Chinese barbecue pork, and then I made a stir fry with that, some veggies, some ramen noodle, and a little bit of the Chinese barbecue sauce. Made it into, like a nice stir fry, and he was blown away. He was rather impressed with my.
Well, I mean, you can cook.
I actually did not know that about me until like the last year and a half. Like I actually enjoy cooking quite a bit. But now I'm to the point where I kind of like it would be fun to make these for you, because the other thing you use that Chinese pork for is pork fried rice.
Yeah, baby.
I like how they refer to your dad as Forge Master Vecchione.
Yeah,
that's not his last name.
It's not his last name, but
Forge.
two-time Forge champion. It was really interesting. We were watching this documentary on CNN about television in the 90s and 2000s, and it talked about the contest shows, like Project Runway and stuff like that. And I all of a sudden I looked over and I'm like, oh shit! Like you're part of that legacy.
Yeah.
Like you are actually a direct part of that. Like Survivor and all of those are the things that led to things like Forged in Fire. Yeah. Yeah, cool stuff. You know what I finished? I finished binging the Neo-Anarchist podcast.
Yeah.
It was okay. The ending was okay. So I think they ran out of history material. And they did an audio drama, which I think you would have liked. They did a multi-part audio drama, but it spanned like 2 or 3 other podcasts. So it occasionally left, there were other episodes. It was about this blackout in Chicago. And there were 28 episodes.
Wow.
And they spanned, they're not long episodes, right? Because they're only 10 minutes a pop. But it would be episode 14 is on the Neo-Anarchist podcast. Episode 18 is the next one in the feed because the other 4 happened on 2 other podcasts.
Yeah, 28. Is it 28 episodes you said?
I think so. 28 parts.
28 parts?
Yeah.
That's 280 minutes of content.
It was a lot. I think it was their whole 5th season, because I think what happened, if I'm guessing correctly, is that they used the Shadowrun versions for the big, The Shadowrun versions are the big chunks of history that they have. And I think they had finished, version 5, and version 6 has only just come out.
I just saw something.
Yeah.
The Bear Swarm podcast has returned with Rob and Mike. I haven't listened to the Bear Swarm in years. It's one of the reasons this show exists is because of those 2 guys. Because I love that
that's
podcast.
Rob Justice?
Yeah.
Who's the Mike?
I always forget Mike's last name. That's interesting. I'll have to listen to it. I'll let you know how it all is next week. I'm sure I'll listen to 1 or 2 or 3 or however many episodes there are. That's fantastic.
Interesting.
I mean, they were all working on 7th Sea for the longest time, and then Rob had a kid. So, you know how that goes.
Yeah, that's how I got on this show.
Yeah, that's exactly how I got on the show.
Thanks, Mark.
So that's fascinating. If you were a fan of the Bear Swarm podcast from way back in the day, when there was only 5 gaming podcasts out there worth listening to, which was essentially, Fear the Boot, the Bear Swarm, I can't remember it went 300 episodes and they stopped. But what our exploratory play is based on, The Walking Eye. There was All Games Considered, which is still around.
Yep.
There's the Pulp Gamer Network back then with a few podcasts out of New Mexico. The game's The Thing.
Oh yeah.
With Savage Worlds. I can't remember his name and his wife.
Ron Blessing.
Ron Blessing, yeah.
Veronica.
Those ones, man. Yeah, Happy Jacks came a little later. They've been around a little longer than us.
Yep.
They're still doing their thing. The podcast, that's what it was.
Oh yeah, the podcast.
And also, I think they're still going too. Is the Jankcast? They've been around for a very long time.
I used
Also,
to listen to the Jankcast.
I think they're still doing their thing. Yeah. So like for podcasters from way back in the day, like there you go.
And then there's us just chugging along.
I mean,
Chug.
still from way. We're almost from way back in the day at this point.
We're about. I mean, to other podcasters, we are way back in the day.
Yeah.
We're so way back in the day that we can actually grab episodes like 200 to 300 episodes ago and redo them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. It's getting late. Let's do some Patreon shoutouts and get out of here, and then we'll talk more.
To me.
Patreon shoutouts. We don't have many because we're at the end of the list.
Okay.
Next week we'll have new ones.
It resets.
It resets. So the Space Rhino, Steve Bissonette, the Closet Gamer, Thomas Hook, Troy E. Taylor, Troy Pitchelman, and sorry, I hit my thing. And Blake Ryan, the Batman.
Who's in the chat room?
Yes.
He is in fact in the chat room.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us tonight.
Yes.
If you are free Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, you're welcome. Come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with the other awesome listeners in our chat room for life and ask us the occasional question.
You know, if you can't make it to the live show, you should check out our podcast each week wherever you get your podcasts. You can also take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone Stone Obsidian, Pandas Talking Games, The Gnome Cast, Zhang Yu Hustle, She's a Super Geek, and The Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, The Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming MBS. And I hear the Tabletop Bellhop's got a new landing page, or is about to have a new landing page for their website. Check it out.
Sweet.
After your inciting incident and before your players run off to complete their story, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly at mmp@misdirectedmark.com. Please go to our ever awesome, super shiny, best place ever, not harvesting your information and selling it off to other people.
But they totally
our
are.
Facebook group.
But they totally are. But you can't say that's a lie.
And check us out on Twitter. The show, the network, is at Misdirected Mark. He's at Robert M. Everson. This guy is the Light 101,
Yay!
and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP Down with D&D and Pandas Talking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at Misdirected Mark Word Scramble. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/sassgeek. Zhang Yu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhang Yu Hustle. And last but certainly not least, the newest members of the group, Bonus Experience, is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience.
They're going to be live on Wednesday.
Sweet.
Only for patrons, though.
Well, then, hey, you know what you have to do. Patrons of MMP, Down with D&D, and Pandas Talking Games get access to the after show, which is coming soon. Pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Pandas... Wow, 2 in one night.
I don't
Misdirected Mark Word Scramble. Yes.
The next one comes with a punishment.
Pandas Talking Games bonus outtakes, and other special releases.
Bob, are you okay?
I'm fine.
Okay. Well, this has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. I didn't screw it up.
I'm getting ready to do the move.
Oh, is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
I thought you were like getting ready to punish me for a second.
No, I got to punch myself.
Oh, okay. Mic drop.
We out!